Good morning, and welcome to Doppler'S Gear Garage. In case we haven't met, my name is Doug, and this is Doppler'S Gear Garage. What a morning it's been. I have been in application system update purgatory, but I'm glad to be here just by the hair on my chin, or the lack thereof. In any case, great to be here. We got a show for you. All right. So first and foremost, I am Doug, if we haven't met, and you are welcome to bring your questions. Mike Rand, hello. I have a long drive to Los Angeles on Thursday. Maybe I'm going to try and give you a call. And Mike is a bit hot. Okay. Let me... You're not kidding. Thank you for that. Hang on. Get down. Whoa, boy. There we go. There we go. Thank you for that. Much appreciated. There's been, we'll get to the Pro Tools purgatory in a moment. In any case, for those of you that have recording setups, you'll know the hell I've been in for the past 24 hours, but we'll get to that in a minute. All right, so first of all, my name is Doug. This is Doppler'S Gear Garage. One of the things that I welcome all of you to do is drop some questions about gear, technique, theory, any of these things that may be kind of challenging your universe. Thank you, Mike. And the other thing is my buddy Louis Olvera, and this is really a story that's near and dear to my heart. In ninth grade, Louis and I played in a band, and we played our local talent show. And the great thing about this band was that we liked to play really loud. Chris, what's going on, Maestro? Great to see you, my blues playing and singing friend. So Rampage was the name of this band, and we kind of rampaged. I remember that the singer, and we were in ninth grade, but showed up with this little tub of, I probably shouldn't be saying this, but a little tub of vodka. I didn't partake, but he was already a little soused by the time we actually, quote unquote, took the stage. But we won the talent show, but in the school newspaper somewhere I've got it written in ink permanently, was that, you know, the thing that was perhaps most impressive about the band was the sheer volume, and that must have impressed the judges since they won. So in any case, and raw energy, if we had that, if anything. In any case, Louis reached out to me over this past week and had a question about buying an amp, and it ties in. What's going on, Digital Viper? Happy Saturday to you. Hello. About buying gear, and it was a really good question because it hit in a couple of key areas that we're going to go to in specificity in a moment. But as it relates to anybody that's looking to buy a piece of gear, there's some overarching things you want to keep in mind. One of the things that players, I think, have a little bit of they're not as clear on is like, all right, well, for example, there's a Badlander 25. Over there are some Badlander 50 combos, and then there are a pair of Badlander 100 heads. So we generally left our own devices think of like, a 50-watt head and a 100-watt head. It's just louder. Well, as it turns out, the difference between the Badlander 100 and the Badlander 50 is not just the fact that the 100 watts louder, it also has a different output transformer, which means that amp sounds different. And if one were to describe the differences, for those of us that love to play more aggressive sounding sorts of things, especially in a live situation, it's got more what I would describe as kick in the pants. You can decide which side of the pants you want to kick somebody in, but the point being is more kick in the pants is generally, but not exclusively, a great thing, especially if you're dealing with guys beating things with sticks and playing with large quantities of stacked 410 cabinets, maybe 15s as well. That is the bass players. And so that kick in the pants really, really matters in those sorts of situations where it's loud. Now, conversely, and I encourage you to watch this if you love, I am in love with what I call Americana. That is to say, it's got this kind of It's got a little bit of blues to it, but it's got a little bit of folk in the midst of. My slide is directly through my pedal board there, so I can't get to it. But the idea is those are. Got this, it's oozing with greasy feeling. So there's a band, the Brothers Landreth, which if you haven't seen them, there's a brilliant video of theirs that's on YouTube that's a couple weeks old, and it's them, the CBC, Canadian Broadcasting something or other, but it's a live video of them. And if you're looking for what I call Canadiacana, that is the Canadian version of Americana, it's as good a guitar playing as I've ever heard. I'll just say it again. The guitar playing is just stellar. And so the Brothers Landreth are just amazing. The vocals are amazing. The song's great. The playing and the guitar playing, out of this world. So the point being is, if you look on stage there, he's got these two little Fender amplifiers. And so there are times where, in contrast to the can I say big hairy balls? I guess I just did. Versus kind of really sensitive. Really more sensitive. Well, you hit chords like that, you can actually hear kind of all the individual notes, because we're not playing with so much gain, and we don't want to shove it down people's throats. And that's where little small amps or pairings of them really come together. All that to say, oh my word. Hello, my friend. Good morning to you. Joey Landreth is one of the most amazing guitar players ever. And his ability to go from rhythm to lead to just atmosphere is just great. So this is where the headroom really begins to matter. All right, so it's interesting that my buddy, good morning. That, by the way, is my dear friend Trent. Sorry, Cam, I did it again. My dear friend Cam, and Cam, amongst other amazing things, does the Gibbs Sunday amazing Instagram thing, and he and I have lots of long conversations about all sorts of great stuff, and he's what I would consider a dear friend. He is also my social media guru, so if any of you are interested in a serious social media program to get your thing together, he is my guy. And you can reach me at DougDopplerMusic@gmail.com if you want to find out more about that. I would be happy to connect you. He is my guy. All right, Sonny, good morning. Good morning, William. Is there a go-to source for IRs for you? I've been digging the York Marshall ones. Didn't know if you had some others you liked and or could recommend. We're going to go there in depth in just a moment. Let me get to, first of all, good morning, Loscar. Buenos dias, mi buen amigo. Mac, great to see you. It is going great, especially with such great company. Now, it's interesting that Cam is here. I'll just say it, amongst other things, Cam also is the community manager for social media for Gibson and Mesa Boogie. So ironically, he happened to pop in this morning. So the deal is, my buddy Lewis, that I played in this band with, reached out to me. He's going, I'm thinking about buying a Mark V 25 or a Mark V 35. Which one do you recommend and why? So let's get right down to it, and let's take a look at a couple of cool little things here. So the deal is when I'm looking at an amplifier, I'm looking for a couple of different things. So first of all, I'm over on the Mesa Boogie site here. I am looking at the Mark series. So I am specifically looking for a couple of important things that you can usually find on a dealer's website. So sometimes out of stock is synonymous with sold out and they're not doing another run of them. In this particular case, this Mark V 35 is just actually out of stock. So if we jump over to Sweetwater and we take a look at their amplifiers here, you can see that Sweetwater has the Mark V 35 available. All right, so boom, and there it is right there. So it's in stock. So what that is telling us that is super valuable to know is that sometimes the manufacturer side, because a lot of manufacturers sell direct, the gear is available publicly, but sometimes the manufacturer, the part that they've held back from their dealers to sell on their own, they've sold through that. So they're getting ready to do the next manufacturing run. Why this matters is a question was specifically about the Mark V 25 versus 35. That gets us to the headroom part of the conversation. So the Badlander 100s were the kind of the second wave of Badlanders that I brought into my studio here. And as I mentioned earlier, they have a different output transformer, more of a kick in the pants sort of a vibe that when you're looking for that is super important. Again, if you're thinking about the Brothers Landreth, you're kind of thinking about these low gain amplifiers and this vibey stuff where you don't want that. You actually almost want the opposite, where it just kind of, if you will, it just kind of sits in the air versus kicks people in the pants. I'm going to get to the comments in just a moment. So the point being is that the headroom also matters in another way. When you're playing in a small venue with a small amp, and so I'm in the midst of this crazy, it's called the Rectifier Project, and basically I'm going through the entire Rectifier line, documenting each one of the different releases, Rev C, Rev D, Rev E, the brand new 90s dual rec. This is called the Standard because it's got the standard dress, black diamond plate, chrome chassis. So the point being is that each one of these amps kind of has its own little nuance. And the deal is with the Mark V 25 versus the Mark V 35, it's not just that it's louder, you also get more headroom. So one is, the thing is that we think about, 50 watts, 100 watts, it's just louder. Well, no, the difference in output transformer is one of the things. So the way that amp hits you, regardless of the volume, is going to be different. That different output transformer, the 100 watt, just smacks you in a little bit, harder. Dare I say are a little hairier. But the other thing about the Mark V 35 is you have more headroom. So say, for example, you're wanting to kind of do something where a big part of what you do is that little spot where you're not all the way up. On the volume control, and that is where that little spot somewhere between just barely let's see. Those little kind of snappy things in those kind of middle positions, like maybe the number 4. And the ability to come down. So the funny thing is, and I've never thought of it like this, but so much of what we think about is what happens when we come up. What happens when we come down? If you think about kind of the more Becky and school thing where so much of the time you're messing with the tone control. Bring the tone control back. Then bring the volume down. All those different tones that are kind of hanging out. When you get quieter, and as you made the point. So that is to say, with my buddy Lewis, who I promised I would get to this within the first 15 minutes, but we're 9:17, so I guess I'm running late. The deal is, one of the things you do want to keep in mind is, first of all, the wattage actually does matter in terms of pure sheer volume. 100 watts will get you a little louder than 50 watts, but most importantly, what you're going to get with a 100 watt amp is you're going to get more headroom. That means that if you want to get your cleans louder, you're going to be able to do it. If you want to get your tweens, that's the space in between your loud setting. right? So the deal is, that and that's where that headroom, the extra wattage really matters. All right, another important thing that I touched on a little bit, the Mark V 25, I'm not going to take you back to the Boogie site and the Sweetwater site. The Mark V 25 has been discontinued. So product life cycle, when you go to resell something, matters, believe it or not. The most recently released amplifier generally has more weight in the marketplace, with one exception. You got to go over to reverb. I'm not going to do it now. And you go through, yeah, I am. Hang on a second. Let's do this. Hang on. We're going to go here. We're going to go here. And what we're going to do is I'm going to kind of walk you through another one of my processes here. We're going to go to the good old reverb, and we're going to look at Mark V 25. What we're going to do is we're going to see, all right, 10 results for Mark V 25. Now let's take a look at how many results we've got for Mark V 35. 15 results. Okay, what that tells me in a hot second is, gosh darn it, Mark V 35 is a more popular amplifier, which means if you're going to spend the money and at some point you want to take the money out of that amplifier, those are key ingredients to all of that. Hope that's a help, Lewis. I love you dearly. My privilege to be able to help an old, not too old friend with all this. All right, let me get back to saying hello to everybody. All right, William. So one of the things I've started doing here is I've started taking notes with the different things of topics so I don't miss anything. So let me add IRs to the list, and I'm just going to say hello to everybody, and we're going to have a pretty heavy conversation about all of this in a hot second. Because, gosh darn it, I've been on a whole little mission in IR world. So Justin York is a friend. He's a brilliant sound designer, great guitar player. So give me a moment to say hello to everybody, and we're going to dive in on the IR front. Sean, good morning to you. Jim, hello, my dear friend. Mesa Boogie Cab Clone IR or Bad Cat Unleash. Maybe ready to bite on an attenuator thoughts. We're going to have a lot of conversation here. Rick, good morning. Okay, hold on. Let me add attenuator to the list. Okay, this is me having fun. You have no idea. The past 3 days I've been in basically gear purgatory on details I'm not going to bore you with. Chris, hey, popping in. Hello, my friend. Francesco, como stai? I can't wait until we get a chance to say hello in person, my dear friend. Pleasure to see you again. Braden, what's going on, my man? Hello, hello, hello. Rick Harrison at the Migo Guitar Show in Southern California. I wish I was there with you as well. I can't wait to see what new you've got. Mr. Harrison designed some of those beautiful guitars. I've got this lovely quilted maple T-style instrument over there that is just a very special instrument for some very special stuff that I'm working on. So thank you for that, my friend. Nandini, good morning. Hello, hello, hello. Kevin Wayne Carr, KWK, come on, bring it on. Eric, hello, hello. Thank you very much. Pedals dialed in, come on. All right, Steve, what's going on, my dear friend? Hello. Lewis, boom. Oh, I know that photo. Hang on a second. Here we go. Hold on, let's see if I can do this without breaking anything. There we go. Hey, the Luis Olvera photo. All right, awesome, awesome, awesome. J. Roy, what's going on? Proxy versus IR. Okay, let's have a proxy conversation. All right, for those of you that don't speak line 6, we're talking proxy. Nitin, what's happening, my man? How's that Telecaster going on? Adam, hello, hello, hello. Okay, and good morning to you. Okay, great USA versus Paraguay match last night in the World Cup. And here I thought it was like the World Series. Okay, so let me go to the top of the list. So here's the thing. Over yonder is a pair of cab clone IRs, IR pluses, and those have been my go-to IR device and attenuator for several years. And there are a number of benefits about the cab clone universe in that the two Badlanders there and that Badlander there have that technology and those IRs built into it. So it means that kind of the studio to stage round trip thing is there. So one of the things that's happening in the craziness that's my world, besides a creaky chair, is if you take a look behind me, you kind of see an array of Mesa Boogie cabinets. And so the deal is in this room, there's no less than 25 412 cabinets. I'm a little, as I would say, Meshuggah, or Meshuggah. So the point being is that, hold on a second. Hi, way too much Doug. That's kind of scary. So here's the deal. The cabinet is such an important part, and for the video that I'm working on, in the same way that if you change out your pickups, a pickup is a transducer, a speaker is a transducer. So in the same way that if you change the pickup on the instrument, it has a huge effect on the sound. Well, the same thing happens at the cabinet end of things. So your ability to have an IR that captures the essence of what you're looking for, and per this list of stuff, attenuation and or capturing it in proxy. We're going to hit the proxy part of this a little bit at the end because there's nuance to that. Again, so Line 6 Helix Stadium has a kind of an internal application called proxy, and it's their capture process, and it's basically these little proxies of whatever it is that you're capturing. And there is nuance around that because basically you're able to capture that entire sequence of gear and bring it in and be able to have it inside your Helix Stadium. So we're going to come back to that. It's on my list. There are a couple of things that are interrelated in the midst of all of this, is that there are a couple of things that I'm chasing personally as a guitar player. One of my biggest missions is to make what I hear with my ears coming out of those cabinets be the same thing that you hear when you're hearing a gear demo or hear me play something. What I'm hearing is what you're hearing. That is to say, I'm supposed to be able to imagine, well, you're on a device this big, or maybe you're on a set of studio monitors, or maybe you're on a TV, and I have to figure out how to make what this sounds like here translate to that environment in a way that is honest to that. So as a general rule, like 99.9% of the time, I never EQ any of the guitar stuff that you'll hear me do, for better or worse, because I'm trying to capture the essence of it. And most of the time, I spend enough stupid time chasing stuff that I don't have to add EQ to fix something or make something apparent that wasn't the case. So here's the thing is that one of the things about the cabinetry that I'm using and is a section of this first rectifier project video that's so important that I, in the process of doing that crazy rabbit trail thing that makes anything that I do, instead of being simple, complicated, because that's who I am. What I discovered was, in seeing pictures of bands like the Foo Fighters and Blink-182, you see that they've stacked 412 cabinets with 212 cabinets. And I was like, okay, well, I actually just need to try this. And you know, so this guy over here, I've got a slant on top of a 212 horizontal there, and that's kind of a rectifier kind of monitor style thing that they made a few years back. John Petrucci recently had some custom versions of those made for him. So it's something that it's not totally in the rearview mirror for our good friends at Mesa Boogie. So the point being is that when and the first one is actually hidden behind here. It's the horizontal 212 on top of the oversized straight cabinet, and basically that's called the rectifier standard. That's a straight. I've played through both of those separately, but when I plugged the two of them in together, I was like, I cannot believe the sound. Just couldn't believe it. And so the deal is that to be able to actually capture that, there are things that Cab Clone IR does exceptionally well But the thing is that you are left, no matter what you do, with a static IR. The decisions that were made on a production level were the decisions that, ironically, the Two Notes team and the Mesa Boogie team and the guy that captured those, who's a brilliant producer engineer here in the Bay Area, they did a great job. However, you don't have the ability to change the oversized rectifier. You don't have the ability to change the horizontal. That is to say, you can swap out the microphones, but what you don't have the ability to do is do anything other than that. You can't change the placement of the microphone. And that's where this Two Note stuff, I've actually got the old one here. This is that Captor X, and that's the Captor X Plus. My next Captor X Plus is showing up on Monday. I'm not an A-list artist in the Two Notes world, but I'm an endorser. So, which means I don't get it for free, but I receive an artist discount. So my friends at Two Notes sent a second one of these along. Now, what this does, it's an attenuator, but there's nuance to the world of attenuation. Here we go. Generally speaking, if you're going to use an attenuator and or an IR, let's just talk about specifically, you're going to be using an IR separate of an attenuator. We're going to come back to attenuator in a moment. If you're using an IR, the most important thing you can do is keep an actual speaker load on your amplifier. Nothing else matters more, because then the amplifier is actually seeing this relationship with an actual speaker. And there are a couple of ways of doing that. Oh, I get myself into trouble. But I've got a photo here, so let me pull this up. 90s dual rectifier images, cabinets. There we go. I'm going to be able to drag this on here like that. Come on. There we go. You can do it. There we go. So there is a 412 cabinet in my ISO booth that's kind of to my left here. And if you take a look, I've got it a little bit off center, and it's kind of on a diagonal. I'm doing that specifically. All right, you can go bye-bye. Oh, I can put you over here. Like, can I minimize you? Can I make you smaller? I bet I can. Eric, we're talking about your amp closet there. So the deal is, there we go. So that, it's on an angle, and it's literally that angle makes it such that when I pull the door off of that ISO booth, and you're seeing that with the door off there, that cabinet is literally facing me at that sweet spot, that isosceles triangle, where I'm listening to the sound of what's coming out of that cabinet. And then I put the door back on, and then I try and approximate that with whatever IR, or in that particular case, you can see there are mics on it, to be able to capture that sound. So the advantage of being able to put a big giant cabinet in there and then close that off is that I'm able to have the amplifiers actually seeing that. So hidden back there is, and it's going to be in this video, is a pair of rectifier 112s. And what's neat about that is there's smaller cabinets. So you, Eric, we've talked about sticking that cabinet in the closet, and that way you're keeping a load on the amplifier. You can stick it in a closet, maybe put a blanket on top of it. You don't want to put the cabinet straight down. As I understand, it's bad for a speaker to not be able to move air, and you could potentially blow your speaker. Not a good thing. So the idea is the 112, if you don't have some sort of isolation booth like that, you can stick it in a closet, again, stick some sort of moving blanket that you can easily get on Amazon, reduce the noise, but you've got signal from that cabinet through the speaker cable that the amp is having that conversation with the impedance curve of that speaker. And the speaker of choice that I use for that is a Celestion Redback. It is a 250 watt rated speaker, which means I can throw a triple rec into it if I want to, and that speaker goes, yeah, whatever. Now, I actually have a Mojo Tone 212 cabinet that's loaded with two of the Redbacks, which means I can run 2 amps at the same time into that as well. The great thing about the Mesa Boogie cabinets, they're stereo, so I could also do that as well. There's a period of time, one of Keith Richards' old amplifiers is here. It's a high-powered twin. There was one that a friend of mine had loaned me that was the Fender reissue that's pretty darn spot on. It's the Joe Bonamassa one. And I had both of those running into, respectively, the left and the right, and I was miking that up. But I was also capturing the sound of that with IR. So the point being is the long version of a very important part of the story that nobody talks about, and we've talked about on the channel here before. But keeping that actual load makes the amp behave differently. If the amp is behaving differently with a load box than it does with a speaker / cabinet, we want to go with the behavior that's associated with the speaker, because that's going to make whatever IR sound more like the actual cabinet. So there are a couple of neat things that the folks at 2Notes have done in the latest version of this. Is they have it so you can, and those of you that speak Fractal, you'll know this inside Fractal, they have basically different speaker impedance curves that you can load into each one of these. Now this is where the attenuator and the IR and all of these things meet. So a while back, I put up a post about this rectifier series that I'm doing on one of the Facebook groups for Mesa Boogie. Hands are a little dry, excuse me. And I asked people, what they liked in terms of, with their rectifiers, what they like to use. And a bunch of the people were like, the various rectifier cabinets, which is kind of, expected. But there were also a number of people that had certain particular Marshall cabinets that they liked. And as it turns out, Justin York of York Audio, whose IRs, by the way, are inside the Fractal ecosystem. He's a brilliant guy, former touring guitar player in Paramore, Mesa Boogie fanatic, flippin' amazing musician, wonderful human being, has brilliant ears. So is a friend. So I reached out to him, and the deal is that he sent over a bunch of different IRs. So to answer the question, whose IRs do I like? First of all, the great thing about the 2Notes people is they have the official Mesa Boogie IRs. So the ones that Doug West at Mesa Boogie signed off on. That's what's in Cab Clone IR, because that's a Mesa Boogie product manufactured by or in association with the folks at 2Notes. So those IRs are in here as what are called Dyne IRs, and this is where the conversation gets interesting. And again, I can be faithful to my friends at Mesa Boogie because these are officially authorized IRs. And the reason these matter for the journey that I'm on right now is, as soon as I started playing through multiple cabinets, I'm like, I've got to be able to present that at least in a couple examples so people hear that. The big bummer about their IR thing and everybody's IR thing is that I have 3 of the vertical 212 Mesa Boogie rectifier cabinets. They are, if you go on to Sweetwater, I'm going to show you another little hack here that's important for gear purposes. So let's get back over to Sweetwater real quick. This matters. It matters to me. It's part of my buying process. So I'm going to go back here to rectifier cabinet, because I can't put this in the video that I'm doing because it's a little too brand centric. What we're looking at is the number of, and first of all, what's great about these is we're looking at the number of 5-star reviews. So we got the horizontal rec with 65, the vertical with 52, and then everything else is kind of a fractional amount of that. So what it's telling you is the 212 rectified cabinets are by far the most popular. The horizontal a little bit more than the vertical, but the vertical is a newer cabinet. And so to me that means more people are buying the vertical now. Nobody has an IR of that, which is shockingly frustrating for me. And as it turns out, inside the 2Notes library, as is the case with Cab Clone IR, there are not IRs of the straight rectifier standard, that's the tall cabinet, and the shorter straight rectifier traditional. They have the slant. So as I kind of am going into this process, I'm probably going to, and this is one of the other things that's really advantageous about the 2Notes technology, is the way their Dyne IRs, which is an abbreviation, an acronym for dynamic IR, is you can move the microphone around in 3D space. So that is to say, I can move the mic down to the lower speakers versus the upper speakers on the slant, and I can at least begin to approximate the sound of the straight cabinets as I go to kind of imitate the sound of that's a Fillmore 212, which technically is no longer made, but it's equivalent with the exception of being a little bit less deep. of the Boogie 212 cabinet, and below that is the rectifier traditional straight cabinet. So the point being is by inside the Two Notes world, by utilizing the two different Captor X pluses at the same time, I can then be able to get the sound of both cabinets playing at the same time, and in turn I can move the microphone around in 3D space, not just one microphone but two. And quite often capturing an IR, the sound of a cabinet is really a matter of finding not only two mics that are the right balance between each other, but getting them that right location and in turn the right mix balance. There's a flippin' ton of detail there that goes into making the IR, and I can see that the number of people watching has dipped a little bit, but for those of you that are here, the nuance of being able to control the placement and the choice of microphones and the blend, that's the nuance that we tweak on. It matters. And so to that end, one of the other questions I asked the Two Notes guys is, these are attenuators. It's a 3-position attenuator. And my question was, so basically when with Cab Clone IR, regardless of what position the attenuator is on, you're still seeing the speaker cabinet as the load that's on the amplifier. It's one of my favorite things about that box. So with both of them, I actually have 4 different iterations. I have 2 of the Cab Clone IR pluses and 2 of the Cab Clone IRs. The pluses are a great attenuator. I love them. But I do not have the ability to manipulate with the Dyne IRs in the way that I want to be able to really capture the essence of this. So the point being is, when you hear 2 of the different cabinets blended together, it's kind of one of the reasons guys like Joey Landreth will take 2 different, it looks like he's using a brown face Princeton and a black panel Princeton. Princeton reverb on the black panel. You can no longer say black face because it's politically incorrect. You can say brown face. Maybe you can't even say brown panel, black face. In any case, you get the idea. So the blend of them, you get this 3D thing. And so the thing that happened when I started plugging in the 2 different cabinets, I'm always a 2-cabinet guy for the most part. Very rarely will I just take 1 cabinet. These days, if I'm taking 1, it's that guy. But the idea is I like using a pair of cabinets, but always, with the exception of 1 gig, I'm always taking a pair of the same cabinets, because I want what's on the left that's on the right for what I do to be the same, with the exception of maybe a dotted eighth delay and a quarter note on each respective side of the stereo field, maybe a stereo delay, but that's about it. I want to be able to walk over to one side of the stage and walk over to the other side of the stage and have it sound very similar. Actually nearly identical, with the exception of the fact that I'll get over into dotted eighth land on one side and quarter note delay on the other. So that, in that sense, the symmetry of using the same cabinets matters. When I started stacking these guys, I could not believe how much I fell in love with it. And believe it or not, let me get rid of this guy here. You can go bye-bye. Sayonara. What you've got here on the outside, you can't see it through here, but basically over here is the horizontal 212 that's on the bottom there, but it's on the top, and then the rectifier standard straight is on the bottom, and here I've got kind of the opposite. I've got the rectifier traditional slant. They sound awesome on their own. As you might have guessed, all 4 at the same time. It's just like, oh, holy flipping cow. Now, the other thing that I discovered is probably my favorite rhythm guitar tone of all time is Slipknot. For distorted heavy rhythm guitar, it's just like, I know we've gone from the Brothers Landreth to Slipknot, but welcome to my crazy universe. And probably like most of you, I listen to a lot of different stuff. So what I discovered, and I'm not quite sure, how this is the case, but hiding behind here is a 112 Recto and a 112 Boogie cabinet. And the combination of those cabinets together with the open back on the top, just like you're kind of seeing right there and there, is the closest to the Slipknot vibe that I've ever come. And I literally plugged down and went like, I know what that reminds me of. And there's something about the way it sounds that's just nuts. And again, I can't capture that with one IR. And so immediately the wheels started spinning. It's just like, okay, how do we get there? I need Fillmore, or actually I need 112 boogie, and I need to be able to have 112 rectifier, and I need to be able to actually have them play at the same time. And I needed to have the nuance to be able to really potentially choose the mics and move the mics, and that's one of the things that I can't do inside the Cab Clone IR universe. So I kind of, and I've ordered this. I have had this here for a couple of months and haven't used it, but it was just kind of one of those things where I just knew I was going to have a moment where I was going to need to call upon that, and that moment came. And the second one, this is the Captor, just the regular X, not the Plus. This gives you the ability on the two XLR outs that if you're using two different microphones, you can split them. Where this matters for us that are serious diehards means I can get those two different XLRs carrying the two different microphones into my DAW, so I can capture those on separate tracks, and then I can change the blend as I'm mixing. Now, where this matters to me and where this matters to you is not just like, hey, I'm capturing the sound of this thing. I'm in the process of working on two really important albums that kind of like my life depends on it. So the deal is there's a guy named Mike Fraser who's one of the best mix engineers in the business, produced and mixed stuff for, I don't know, Metallica, AC/DC, Jimmy Page, Coverdale, Joe Satriani. And I've got to get the best possible tones. So when he pulls up the faders, he's like, I know exactly what I'm doing. And that what I'm doing is not fixing Doug's track. It's like flipping A. He's given me the two different mics. I can blend it to fit the track perfectly. Basically, he should have to apply next to no EQ on my guitar tracks because of the time and the nuance that I spent building my guitar tones around the drum and the bass performances, the sound of the guitars, the way I recorded them as it relates to the drum and bass performances, and the choice of IRs and the choice of microphones around that. I'm mixing my guitars for the instrumentation such that when the guy that goes to mix the entire thing, the decisions he gets to make are fast because I'm not going with a guy that is on the budget list of guys to mix. I'm serious about this, and I'm hiring the best guy I can possibly hire that I know of, because he's lived. If you think about AC/DC, if we think about kind of not traditionally detuned guitar, and we think about kind of probably the best rhythm guitar tones and the best kind of like you can hear one chord of AC/DC and you go, I know who that is. That's iconic rhythm guitar tone. That's for my own version of me, if I could create a little mini Doug, thanks to my buddy Brad, a little mini Doug icon, sonically, it's got to look and sound like me. All right. So the attenuators, proxy, it's an interesting thing. One of the things that, as I think about getting to go out on the road, I know that there's a possibility that some shows will be fly dates. And so being able to capture all of this goodness inside a Line 6 Helix Stadium, I've got two. I'm a Line 6 endorser. I've worked with them for 15 years. I love the company. The people are amazing, just like the folks at Mesa Boogie. So I know that there's going to be times that I'm going to be stepping off an airplane somewhere with a Helix backpack and Helix Stadium. And it's going to be this in that. And Proxy is the gateway for that. And I'm super, super excited. My buddy Brian Wall, most famous for Warship tutorials, but they also have a new company called Signal Theory. They are capturing an amazing array of amplifiers. Brian's more of a Warship guy, but they have this great metal dude. I'm going to forget metal dude's name, but he's a great player. And they're just capturing a ridiculous collection of amps in Proxy. So the idea of all of that, it's a great way, first of all, for us in our home to be able to kind of capture the sound of what we're looking for. So, for example, if you really wanted to kind of go, okay, if I wanted to take the sound of this rig and those cabinets, I could do that inside Proxy and I could take that out on the road, which is really, really, really exciting. Okay, that catches me up here. So let me get through. Okay, Oh, no, no, no. Thank you. Voice mic is clipping. So my buddy. Okay, hang on a second. Yeah, it is. Hang on. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. There we go. A little less hot. Thank you for the input there. You're not thanking me for the input. That's better. Okay. Test 1 2. How about if I get a little more excited? A little hotter than I want. Let's bring it down a little bit more. All right, let's ding that there. How about that? Hey, hey, hey. All right. Thank you for that heads up. Clipping is a bad thing. Okay. Thank you for that, Brian. Much appreciated. Good morning, Eric. Rick, I have a rectifier in my 98 Joyo Jam Buddy too. That's awesome. All right, Albert, there's my t-shirt. You know, it could be slightly awkward for me to say, I wore this shirt for you, but I did. So... You know, the Mabuhay Gardens. So the funny thing is that, you know, I got these shirts from TeePublic, but they have had this little bit of an issue of getting the printing totally straight. And it's actually even this one, which is one of the good ones, is still a little crooked. Either that or I'm crooked. In any case, word for you, my friend. Okay, well, the great news is that we've kind of gone through all the immediate questions. So, but I'm open if anybody's got any more. Hopefully, first of all, that answered people's questions about IRs, attenuation, proxy, attenuators. I guess I hit attenuator twice. Now, my buddy Chris Alexander sent through a couple of different questions. One of which was, and I love this question. One of the questions was about the Fender thing. We're not going to go there today. But the one question that he led with, which I love, is if I could take 3 pedals with me anywhere, what would they be? That is to say, if you kind of had to have like 3, can't live without them pedals, what would you take? There's a pedal called an Eddie Boost Drive that is made by Messiah Guitars. They're not a Christian company. They don't make guitars, but that's what they're called. And the Eddie Boost Drive is a fabulous drive pedal. It's just really kind of magic. The next one on the list is the Atmosphere. Is it the Atmosphere? What's the Andy Timmons pedal called? No, I call it Atmosphere. It's the Andy Timmons delay, not the Aura, but it's the Andy Timmons pedal. That kind of has that vibe that Andy's famous. The Halo, thank you. The Andy Timmons Halo pedal. It's a great pedal. You kind of can't go wrong with that. I would say last on my list, hiding around here, is my Eventide Time Factor. Why I like that, it's big, it's heavy, and it's got knobs on the top. In the heat of battle, having, you know, and it was a funny thing. It's like, you know, my foot is, there we go. In the heat of battle, there's always stuff going wrong. That is to say, when you're on stage. And one of the things that I actually did at the last gig, actually Albert was there. He might not have noticed me doing this, but I actually put the time factor on top of the amp. And I actually gently started bouncing up and down on the stage, seeing how much the amp actually rocked. And I was like, yep, it's a thing. So the idea is that in a perfect world, if we had some little kind of like DD fill-in-the-blank Boss pedal, we might stick it up on end just so we can kind of, you know, see it. But what that does is it sets it up to want to fall off the top of the amp, which means now it's flat on the top of the amp. You can't see it. You can't easily adjust it. You know, you can memorize where your mix is, but it's sloppy to work with. The great thing about the time factor is the top leftmost setting. It's either top left or the bottom left is, and I think it's the top left, is the mix. So you can just literally kind of bring your hand up the left-hand side of the pedal, top, and that top left control. And that wouldn't have been by accident. So you can instantly, if you want just a little bit more delay, you just bring it up. You want a little bit less, and the knobs don't have little catches like you've got on Quad Cortex, but they're still graduated enough that you can feel some tug when you pull the knob, so you can feel how much you want to attenuate the volume of the delay up and down. And because it's a dual delay, you can have separate delays on left and right. You can bring them a little bit closer to the center. You can add some modulation. It's a tremendously powerful tool. All right. What I would love to hear you break down the Mesa cabs in the FM9. So the funny thing is, are we connected or in the midst of all the craziness? What would I have to do that? I'm not going to do that, but I am going to do something else. Hang on a second. Let me get back into rack world here. Because part of my world is very much involved in the fractal universe. All right, let me get this guy. That's not good. Why are you not? I'm actually down behind this rack, wondering why you're not powering up. Oh, because the whole rack isn't powered up yet. Okay, got it. Give me a moment. I can fix this. I can do this. There we go. Almost there. Okay, you. I want you. I want you. All right, we got power. So I should have power over there at the VP4. There we go. All right, VP4 is up. Oh, because I've disconnected the USB. Oh, that's not going to be easy, is it? Oh, you bugger. All right, hang on. Let me see if this is easy or not. If it's easy, oh, there we go. I know what I need to do. Yes, I can do this. Here we go. We're taking... Why are we not showing up on USB? Because we're disconnected. Okay. Almost there. Patience. Or next cable. There we go. There we go. You should see VP4 goodness in about now. Okay, you're not seeing it, but I am. All right, let's get here. Let's get here. It's not where we're going to go. It should be fractal. VP4 edit. There we go. All right. Oh. No, that's not what we want. Okay. All right. What you're seeing there is actually, I'm actually good that it did that. I'm not going to update that. So as I go between this preset here, you're going to see that everything, if you look, kind of the signal goes from left to right. And that means that everything's in series. But as I go to this preset right here, I got to be in the right version of the, where am I? Am I in VP4? What the hell? Why are you not going to the next preset? Oh, I see. I got to close out of that. Cancel. There we go. When we go over here, you're going to now see that my delay and my reverb, and they're not in line with what I'm running right now, have gone in parallel. And the advantage of this is that it enables me, when I get inside here, in the mix and the routing, is I've got the kill dry on both of these guys. So basically what it means is I can go through here. I've got, for this particular rig, I've got set up for a wet dry wet rig that I'm going to be doing. And it allows me to have pure delay and pure reverb coming out what's going to be the stereo outputs coming out of here. The VP4 does not include any IRs or any amp modeling, but inside the fractal universe, being able to run your effects in series, one into the other, just like you would do your floor pedals, or in parallel, is a big thing. So yesterday, I think I can share this, Maddie Schieferstein, I always want to say Schifferstein, but it's Schieferstein, is John Petrucci's longtime tech, and he's going to be a guest on this first rectifier video. And the main focus of the video for him was talking about the rectifier cabinets and what cabinets John Petrucci, that is, uses and why, and kind of, Maddie, because he's there for all of this and knows the inventory better than anybody, is very aware of this. But one of the things that we talked about was John's rig, and kind of he walked me through John's current rig and kind of how they're running the stuff in Fractal Universe. And the idea is that the delays and the reverbs are running in parallel, like you saw set up in that preset that was there. And it basically means you lose, if you think about kind of the classic Eric Johnson sound, you kind of hear the delay pinging into a reverb when he's using a reverb. So you kind of get not only the direct signal going, with the echoes, but you also get each subsequent little echo kind of creating. It's as if you had a handful of one big rock and a bunch of pebbles, and you threw them into a body of water, the way the sound ripples. And it's really special, but it makes it very difficult to separate your delays and your reverbs because they're intertwined. It's a lovely sound. Part of it is you're creating this kind of wash that's the essence of that by running in series. But when you separate your delays and your reverb, it's much like what you would do in the studio, where one fader brings up the stereo delay, another fader brings up the stereo reverb, and then you can adjust the blend of them independently, which when you're running them in series, they influence each other in ways that are good and bad simultaneously. So the idea of having the ability more delay, more reverb, less reverb, maybe in section, you can write it in scenes, you can use a controller like Sonia's axis. What is the dual expression pedal? The dual axis expression pedal. The point being is you can then literally with your hand or your feet be able to control both your delay and reverb separately from one another without kind of the fact that one's flowing into the other changing. And the ability to do what's called a kill dry means that for the wet dry wet rig that I've put together for this video, where it's the two Badlander 100 heads coming out of Cab Clone IR straight into Pro Tools, and then the dual rectifier on the middle cabinet, but I'm doing actually all that with IRs. It's so clean and so pure that when you bring in the delays and the reverbs, you're like, wow. It's a many splendored thing. All right. So in terms of the Mesa cabs and the FM9, I can tell you very little about them, other than the fact that there are a bunch of Justin York's cabs in there, and they're great. And the important thing about being inside the cab block, and since it's the VP4 that you saw up on the screen, yes, it's either live or it's Memorex. I don't know. Or Doppler'S or something. Or maybe you're at Doppler'S or something. I don't know. Okay. Hang on a second. So let me just finish up here. So the thing is that one of the things that you get inside the Fractal universe, that they were probably the first people to do it, is that inside the amp and cabinet blocks when they marry together, and I think it is in the amp block, but I could be wrong, is you have the ability to change the speaker impedance curve. And that is, again, the relationship of the way the speaker is loading the amplifier. And as you play different frequencies with different amounts of gain and different amount of pick attack, that amp and the speaker are breathing as one together. And the information that speaker is feeding back to the amplifier in the power amp section is where that speaker impedance curve matters so much. It's one of the reasons why when I picked the Redbacks, one of the things I did before, and that is to say, for those of you that missed this, and the risk of repeating myself, here we go, because it's important. The Redback, as I went over the Celestion site, I looked at the frequency response curve of that speaker, compared it to the classic Lead 80, which is basically the MC90, the Black Shadow, the Mesa Boogie kind of stock speaker that's in those two cabinets right there. And then the Vintage 30, the Redback is approximately halfway in between those two, and I'm like, oh, this is great. And the MC90 and the Vintage 30 were actually surprisingly close, as much as some people are like, oh, I hate the Vintage 30, it's so nasal, and it's just like, and I was like, the classic Lead 80 is Joe Bonamossa's go-to speaker, and so I understand there's just slightly different doping on the edges of the speakers for the MC90, which is basically, for all intents and purposes, a classic Lead 80, which is a much beloved speaker. All right, that is to say, the speaker and speakers that I use for my reactive live speaker loads, when I'm using an IR, I'm also have taken time to match them to the speaker that is most commonly going to be used, or the two speakers, that I would most commonly use with these boogies. Okay. Jim, on nuts. Have to leave for an eye appointment. We'll listen back later. Figures. Okay. So, Jim, I may have left you with more question marks. Have a good appointment. I will have spent a lot more time inside this universe when I see you next weekend, and I will be able to give you a much deeper kind of. Well, actually, I'll be able to play some examples for you, which is actually pretty cool. And it's there's more to it than we just plug in and we load up an IR. So I hope that helps. Okay. All right. Let me jump back over to my buddy Chris's questions because he keeps feeding me good stuff. What a pal. I love that guy. Not going Fender today. Changing tubes. It's a very interesting thing. I basically, first of all, Orange makes a tube tester that they launched a good 10 years ago, give or take, and maybe more like 15. So I have one of those here, and I don't use it, but it's here in case I need to. So here's one of the things, is that where that would be valuable is determining how hot. So say you've got an amp and you just love this amp. I love everything about the way it sounds, a tube amp. What would enable you to do, as I recall, is you can not only test the tubes to see how they are, but as I recall, it gave you a value on a meter that's on there of how hot that tube is. So it means that you could then, as you go to replace the preamp tubes, because I've had, as I look around the room here, I've replaced tubes on a couple of the amps that I can see, both power amp tubes and preamp tubes. So again, the question being, how often do you replace them? Generally, I replace them once they start to go microphonic, or the amp just all of a sudden I in a perfect world, I would chronicle every tube, and if I played one main amp and only that one main amp, I would probably every 3 months, and I'd set some sort of timer on my Google Calendar, where I would pull the tubes out and just test them, and would allow me to tell by my cycle how much life I actually got us out of set of the Mesa Match tubes. And those will potentially change if you start touring a lot, or maybe you start playing a lot of acoustic or whatever. But generally speaking, you'll then get an idea of the lifestyle cadence of what you can expect, and know at what point you could start testing. Because one of the things you don't want to have happen is a tube fail inside an amplifier. You can potentially blow up your amp, which is generally a very bad thing. I remember being my buddy played in a band called the Freak Executives, and there was another band that they were playing with, and the bass player had an SVT, and all of a sudden the SVT stopped working, started smoking, and then caught on fire. I can assure you, an amp that has caught on fire will be very expensive. And it's not funny, but I just remember seeing literally fire coming out of the amp. Just it's just one of those things. You're like, well, that's a first. For those who can't see that, YouTube gave me a live stream of yours from 5 years ago, and it took a few minutes to figure out what was wrong. Glad we sorted that out. Hello, my friend. Good morning, Mark. Pleasure. Okay, so the tube cycle is actually an important thing. One of the other things is that I bought these two Badlander 100s. One I bought new, and one I bought used. And last week we were kind of talking about the process of looking for a used amplifier, finding out kind of what a good kind of, if you will, that medium price point is, and then if you're looking for a smoking deal, knowing what to look for in terms of how used or not used do you want the amplifier. So it turns out the used one I got from Guitar Center, and I think I paid like $1,350. It was really cheap, but when I got it, the on-off light was burned out. which generally means that the power tubes have probably been in there since day one. And so, because I have the privilege of being a Mesa endorser, I was able to reach out to my artist relations guy, and we were able to work something out on the tubes. And so I ended up replacing the tubes, because again, what you don't want to have happen is blow a tube set. So the nuance of those amplifiers, and these for that matter, is you can swap out. You have to flip the bias switch between EL34s and 6L6s. It's actually kind of one of the cool things about one of the demos I'm going to do. It's because these are both 90s dual rectifiers. So I'm going to be able to load one up with 6L6s and the other with EL34s, and with some fancy switch stuff, be able to toggle between the two of them. Are you guys wired? You should be. Let's see. No, I pulled that MIDI cable. Right? In any case, part of my week has been around rigor madness. So the idea is that I pulled things apart because I've rewired everything twice or three times. This is not wired up yet, but this is a groovy little dealio here. Basically, behind me, you've got kind of 4 different stacks, and each one of those stacks is wired in series. So that is to say, let's talk ohms here. So the great thing about these amps that's different than all the previous rectifiers is there are 2 8-ohm speaker jacks on the back. Traditionally, there's been one 16-ohm, one 8-ohm, and 2 4-ohms. Generally speaking, your boogie cabinets are 8-ohm cabinets, so if you hook 2 of them up to the back of this, you're going to put them at the 2 4-ohm jacks because of the load that's on there. If you go in the opposite direction, that is to say, which is what I've done with all these other cabinets here, is I run one speaker cable to one amp, and in series, I go out of that speaker cabinet into the input of the other. You're running them basically, if you will, piggybacking them. And basically, if you do that with 2 8-ohm cabinets, you're creating a 16-ohm load. So you either want to go into the 116-ohm output, or if you use 2 of these respective stacks, you want to run it into the 2 8-ohm jacks that they put on the back here, which is a really, really important addition in my world. Because once you start playing with these cabinets, quote-unquote mismatched cabinets, they're all 8-ohm cabinets, but once you start putting either the combination of the 212s on the bottom or the 212s on the top that you can't see there, or the open back 212s on the top, and the closed back 412s on the bottom, once you play them combined like that, it's next to impossible to go back. Once you hear it, you're just like, and it again, part of the rabbit trailing for all of this was just like, I don't know, let me try it and see what happens. And every so often you try something, you're kind of like, all right, it's just another cabinet on top, right? If you took a 412 cabinet that was the straight, and the sound of the slant, and you put the slant on top of the straight, you kind of get what you're going to expect. What happened when I started combining those cabinets was a layer of 3D sound that I was just like, I don't think anything has surprised me more tonally for the better, maybe ever. I was just like, I can't believe how great this is. Close second was running this with a wet, dry, wet, with the 2 Badlander 100 heads, just hearing that. And one of the cool things is because the boogie cabinets are stereo, and you can do this, and again, this applies to anybody. You don't have to be doing it with the Marshall 1960A and 60B cabinets that are commonly available as stereo cabinets. So what you can do is you can do wet, dry, wet with 2 cabinets. You basically use the 2 center columns, boom, boom, center 412, if you will, if this is the right cabinet, and this is the left cabinet. I should say this is the left cabinet for you. This is the right cabinet. You take the center speakers on the left cabinet and the center speakers on the right cabinet, and those are your direct signal. You get them through through the stereo side. That's the right of this one and the left of that one, and then your effects are on the outer ones. You can do that with 2 cabinets. And what's neat about that is that, for example, you wanted to have wet, dry, wet, and you used dotted eighth and quarter. Let me see if I can do this. I'm pretty sure in the VP4 I've got this. Let me just check. get over here. There we go. So with the fractal stuff, let me get over here. And because this isn't set up right, mix, there's the spread. So the deal is, let me get over to fractal land here again. Over on the lower right there, you're going to see stereo spread. And that's your ability to choose how far separated, if you've got a stereo effect like a dotted eighth on one side and a coordinate on the other, how far spread across the stereo field you want them. So you can bring them in closer to the center, such that if you're running a 2-cabinet wet, dry, wet rig, it enables you to have one cabinet further over on the left, another cabinet further over on the right. So you're able to do wet, dry, wet with 2 cabinets. Well, that's basically what I was doing with the 2 cabinets and using the 2 Badlander 100s for the outermost 212s, and then the dual rec for the inner 412. And when I plugged it in, because sometimes you think like, all right, this is going to sound good. I plugged it in and I was like, I can't believe how great this sounds. And that, you know, it's just kind of one of those things where you like, holy cow. All right, in any case, this is made by a company called Kahayan. Tim Pierce uses these. There's some other options in the marketplace. But this one, what's kind of cool about this allows you, although they're not hooked up right now, select between any of 8 amps. And this is going to allow me to kind of, as I'm kind of doing my last little bit of research on the nuanced differences to my ears between the different cabinets as I begin to describe them in this video, this is your cabinet selector. So I'll be able to select any one of those 4 cabinets through any one of the heads that I connect to it. So I can set this to be dual rectifier number 1 and this to be dual rectifier number 2. And with the crazy switching that I've got via MIDI, although it's not currently hooked up, I just need to put it back together, I can remotely hold on. Yeah, I can remotely choose which channel each one of these amps is on. And in turn, because you know there's an orange channel and a red channel in each one of these amplifiers, the ability to just toggle back and forth between them and kind of go, all right, I'm on this cabinet, and let me toggle between the 2 different amps. And because this is MIDI, this can now become part of my live rig in case I want to do cabinet switching in a live situation. For right now, I would not normally be doing that. But if, you know, the deal is, as I kind of went down this rabbit trail, I realized that most of the time when we watch an amp demo, we very rarely see it the way we actually use amps. Like sometimes there'll be some effects, but quite often, and I'm guilty of this, I'll run that capture the amp raw, you know, dry, if you will, sorry, into my DAW and I'll add effects inside the DAW. Well, that's great inside a recording studio, and there's a bunch of us that live in this recording studio. But what happens when we go to play live? You know, there's very little talk about like, hey, this is what I found out about the loop. This is where you want to set it. Here's some different ways and different effects that sound really good with this. Here's how I routed this thing. And this is, by the way, if you want to go all the way down the rabbit trail. For your orange channel, you want to use this combination of speaker cabinets. For the red channel, you want to use this other one. And I can choose that. And I can control all of this via MIDI. And all this stuff now, although it's not plugged in, it's all been tested and works. And enables me literally from this guy and kind of having this guy in pedal board mode, I can switch channels on the amps. I can choose which amp I'm going into by controlling the AB box here, which is MIDI compliant. I can turn the effects loops on and off. I can change presets or send CC messages to the VP4 to tell the delays to turn on or off, the delay or the reverb to turn on or off. I can choose with an expression pedal to bring that up and down. So basically, that's the sort of stuff that, you know, when we get into the real world, it's like, okay, you know, how do I manage this amp in a real world setting? And that, so that's kind of including, you know, how do we make it sound through there like it does through there? That's all I got to say about that. All right. So the Mark 25 is still the fly amp. There are a few choices in MIDI rectifier, Badlander 25, and TA30. Okay. Uh, uh, Dennis, good morning. Okay. Albert, to the rescue. I love you dearly. So the Mark 25 is no longer in production. So it's a great question. So for those of you, and thank you, Albert, who don't know, my Fly Mesa Boogie amp, when I know I'm going to have access to a cab or cabinets, has been the Mark 525. It's around here. There it is. It's over there. You can't see it, but it's over yonder. What's neat about it is a phenomenal sounding amplifier. I've never played the Mark 535, which my guess is because it's got 30% give or take more power, is probably everything that I love about the Mark 525, but with a little bit more juice. That said, it's also bigger. So the Mark 525, what I love about it is I can pack it into a carry-on suitcase and I actually get onto an airplane with that little head. And then you can, the good folks at Line 6 sent me, there's a little kind of multi-effects unit. I'm going to forget the name of it. But my artist relations guy sent me that. And so it means that I can fly with a very small multi-effects thing that allows me to get delay and reverb and just put that there in the amp. The other thing that I do, pretty much every piece of gear that I've got, you'll see that there's Velcro on the top. And so I'll frequently have Velcro on the bottom of just about anything and Velcro on the top of just about anything so that I can adhere stuff to it and it's not going to go anywhere. So, yes, the Mark 525. So let me just get over to here and let me get here and let me make sure I'm not misspeaking myself. Hang on just 1 second. Oh, I see. I wanted to get back out of there. Okay. So this is... So a little earlier in the show, and whether you were here or not, but I didn't continue this idea on, so I'm going to do that now. So one of the things that we're faced as we're buying gear is I want to go here and I want to go here. So, for example, there are times we go onto a manufacturer's website, and so here I'm on the Mark Series page here. And so you'll see when something's not available, the photo's grayed out, it says out of stock. Now the Mark IIc++ is sold out, so you're never going to get that in. It's not only out of stock, it's also, at least for now, or probably forever, out of production. So this Mark 535 head is out of stock, but not out of production. The Mark 5... Sorry. That's weird. All right, there's two of them on here. Sometimes they have subtle differences. The Mark 525, there it is, yeah. It's not only out of stock, but I actually know that it has reached its end of life. So one of the things is you go over to the manufacturer site, and if they sell direct, you kind of look at inventory. Like here, the Mark 7, you don't see anything like out of stock like you do for this Mark 535. That just means that they're out of their inventory, but the way we double check is we go over to Sweetwaterville, and I go, all right, now I'm looking, let's see, let's get over to Mesa Mark. And that should give me everything that I want. And now I'm taking a look at, there's the Mark 535 combo. There's the Mark 535 2C Plus, not the Plus Plus. And Mark 7, a JP2C, so on and so forth. But you're not going to see any Mark 525s. And that is, besides calling my artist relations guy, this is the first way that I check what is still currently in production, because if Sweetwater's got it, generally speaking, Sweetwater has anything that is currently available for Mesa Boogies. That way I'm able to tell. So again, the idea is kind of going, hey, if we're in gear acquisition mode, we want to see, is it currently in production? If there's a Mark 5, 25, and 35, are they both in production? Whichever one is out of production is probably worth a little less on the used market. However, we might actually be more interested in the Mark 525 because it's smaller and you can fit it into your roll-on bag and they don't give you a hard time. That's a great way to go. And basically, I encapsulate in bubble pack just in case I'm not able to carry it on. I've checked it before and it's fine because they're built like little tanks. And for those reasons, this has become my fly boogie amplifier when I know that there's a cabinet on the other side. So yeah, it's a thing. All right. Those are the main points of what I wanted to cover today. And if we're not going to have any more questions in the next few moments, I'm going to take a little break before my first lesson of the day starts. But I will say, just kind of in closing, the idea of being able to switch amps and cabinets and remotely switch which amp you're targeting and being able to switch the individual channels in the amps, and then in turn, separate from having actual cabinets, but being able to have your choice of IRs of what you're sending front of house, kind of means that you've kind of created a powerhouse range of solutions for taking your tone that's on stage here, as well as, you know, pushing stuff out to your there's what's behind you, there's what's in front of you, which is either your DAW and your studio monitors or an audience that you're playing to. And so, you know, the idea of being able to, one of the things that I've been kind of doing some of the research on these guys that people have talked about is the ability to choose what you're sending front of house. It means there's no ifs, ands, or buts around which mics they're placing and where, so on and so forth. In closing, one of the interesting bits of conversation I had with Maddie, John's Tech, yesterday, what it reminded me of kind of like my basic suggestion around choosing the right speaker / cabinet for what you're doing is based on the style or styles of music you play and the size of the venues in which you play it. The bigger the venue, at a certain point, you don't need the stage volume because it's all PA. And, you know, especially these days, more and more bands are going with a silent stage. However, with the Dream Theater guys, one of the things that Maddie talked about that is really great is like having a cabinet on stage is actually really important for the guitar. You're getting that tactile response. The guitar is hearing itself through speakers. It's getting its sound reverberated back, and it behaves differently. It's a really important thing. If you think about Joe Satriani, you know, he may be on ears now, but he's playing with a lot of cabinets and monitors because the monitors are there not for his ears, but for the guitar and that tactile sense. And you'll also, if you go to see Joe, you'll see him hunting, and you'll also see him by the time you get to the performance. And I don't know whether they actually tape it, but you know, you just kind of know where the spot is. You almost kind of begin, first of all, you walk into it and you can feel the guitar come to life, and it's just like, oh, I'm in that sweet spot. And there are other places you walk on stage like where it goes from a nice note to you're like, okay, I don't go there, and you can feel it begin to come on when you walk into that spot. But sometimes you have to walk through that spot to get to another spot, and sometimes that gremlin spot is really close to your pedal board, and you're like, I kind of need to have my board here, and you're just like, it just is what it is. And some stages sound good everywhere, and some stages sound terrible. And some rooms change when people get in there. So the information you gathered when you were in sound check, all of a sudden the Roseland Theater in Portland, which is one of my favorite places to play. It's a big kind of square room. It's basically got a wooden floor and cement walls. Lots of natural reverb in a square-shaped room, which means the standing waves are a thing until it fills up with people, and then it sounds amazing. Sound check is a little brutal. The gig is amazing, and it's just like, I was like, wow, I can't believe the difference. In other rooms, like the Baked Potato, which is just dead absorption on every surface. Every time you go there, you're just like, okay, I'm going to have to use more reverb and delay than I've ever used in my life. And it's still sometimes not enough, and you just got to go, okay, I got to be ready for that. It's just one of those things. You're playing the room, and this is kind of where this larger conversation comes in, which is like, hey, until you walk onto that stage, there's a bunch of information you don't know. And it was really interesting getting back to the Maddie conversation. They play really huge venues where the fact is that, you know, they can have so much space that John's 2-4-12 cabinets are off stage. I mean, think about, you know, from the majority of the people that are here, the venues that we play at, having enough space that there are 2 cranked 412 cabinets somewhere off in the nethers that are connected, that are feeding our in-ears, that's not most of our experience. It's our dream experience. But the idea of we're somewhere between, I've got a combo and I'm playing to a small room, and that, we're somewhere in that paradigm, and sometimes moving back and forth between some of those different experiences. And, you know, the thing that I will encourage you to do is every time you play a gig, you use it as a testing experience, not only to test your own capacity, but every single one of these gigs, Albert, you know, and I talk about this a lot. There's a local venue. It's called Antlers. It is a bar. It's more of a bar than a venue, but there's a stage. The people are really cool. The people that go there, it's as receptive as Texas. It's California. It's Texas and California. They love rock and roll there. It's great. The people who run the bar, it's great. Everything's great. But you're still playing a venue that looks more like a bar than a nightclub, because there's a wraparound bar and there's a stage. The majority of the focus of the venue is the bar. It's a bar. Average Antlers Tavern. But every time I go there, I test out a little bit of rig strategy, because I'm like, okay, I'm going to test out these cabinets. I'm going to test out this amp. I'm going to see if what I'm practicing here translates to there. And so as you go and play different venues, I want to encourage you to just think about, you know, whatever it is. And no matter where you play, just kind of be thinking about, like, well, of the other places that I will potentially play, what's that like? All right. I'm going to take a little break before I go into my first lesson of the day. Much love to you. Thank you for letting me hang out with you. And hopefully that has served you on your tone quest. And I look forward to seeing you next Saturday. Thank you much. I'll see you on the flip side. Bye for now.